Thank you all so much for joining us. I see a lot of familiar faces who have been with us since this morning and have enjoyed the expo. It has been a wonderful day of conversation and learning, talking about AI, reimagining the way that we teach, and we are now joined by a fantastic faculty panel. I am here to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Marty Samuels, who is the Center for Teaching and Learning's Director of Faculty Programs and Services on the Morningside campus, and I will hand it over to you.
Oh, wait a minute. Do I need to turn this? Oh, it turns on automatically. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Good afternoon, my friends. Thank you for joining us for this panel. As Amanda mentioned, my name is Marty Samuels. I'm the Director for Faculty Programs and Services at the Center for Teaching and Learning, the CTL. We're so thrilled to have a chance to chat with you today. And I am so deeply honored and pleased to introduce and moderate today's faculty panel, Celebration of Teaching and Learning, Faculty Innovation with AI. So one thing I just wanted to start off before we hop into our amazing group of panelists is just to embarrass them a little bit and tell you how awesome and thoughtful they are. Today's group of panelists have thought incredibly deeply and rigorously about how they can integrate AI into their classrooms to foster critical thinking, to help their students deeply engage with the course materials, to inspire curiosity, all while centering human connection and emphasizing the social aspects of learning. They come from multiple different disciplines and backgrounds, from health sciences to writing to languages and culture. And what's beautiful about that is that they're all rigorously addressing the central question that we're all thinking about today, which is, what does it mean to teach in this moment of disruption with AI, and how do we inspire the students to kind of learn with us and grow with us? Before we begin, I also want to note that each of these projects was generously supported and funded by the Office of Provost Teaching and Learning Innovation Grants and developed in collaboration with our amazing team of CTO colleagues who inspire me with their dedication and expertise every single day. And we're going to begin by giving each panelist an opportunity to share a little bit about their project. Why did they do their project? What were they hoping to do? What did they do to incorporate AI into their classroom? What did they learn along the way? Then we're going to have a question and answer session. We're going to stick up a QR code so you can post some questions in the same way we've had for prior sessions. And then we'll wrap up. So without further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Dr. Wing Fu is the Assistant Professor of Rehabilitation and Regenerative Medicine of Physical Therapy at the Vigelos College of Physicians and Surgeons. Wing will be sharing her project entitled AI-Assisted Coaching, Empowering Academic Success Through Master Adaptive Learning Model. Wing, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. Such a nice introduction. I was going to say something about myself, but now I don't have to, right? Great, thank you. So like Marty said, I'm here to present my project using AI to strengthen, not replace, the human side of student coaching. So that's why we have this title here. So let's see if the clicker works. Oh, it does. All right, so let's take a look at the project first, what it is about. So like I said before, right, so it's about AI, and I integrate AI with the human coaching, personalized human coaching. The aim is to support student physical therapists when they experience academic difficulties. And the whole project is guided by the MAL model, which is Master Adaptive Learner Model. I'm not sure if everyone has heard of it, so I'll go over that briefly. Right? As you can see on the right-hand side, that's the model picture. So there are three elements in this model. The first element is the learner. Of course, that's the most important thing, right? The learner. That's in the center of this model. So the learner, when they learn, they go through 4 phases. We have the planning phase, the learning phase, the assessing phase, and the adjusting phase. And each phase, we expect certain learning behaviors. And the goal is for them to go through these phases and become able to learn and become a master adaptive learner themselves. And at the same time, it's not just about learning behaviors, right? They also need to have actually 4 internal characteristics. And we're talking about those batteries at the right lower corner. So they are curiosity, motivation, resilience, and the growth mindset. So they need both. They need those batteries to drive their learning. At the same time, they need to have those learning behaviors in order to learn effectively. So the second element is the coach, which is next to the batteries, as you can see, right? So that's the second element in this model. And the third element is the learning environment. So for this project, we'll be focusing on the learner, and particularly focusing on the learning behaviors and on their internal characteristics. So just to give you a little background about this project, student PTs or student physical therapists, they're just like any other students in the world, right? They often experience some challenges when they learn, and that could affect their academic performance. So, but at the same time, as educators or as a program as a whole, we are not just obligated, but we're actually required to optimize their success. So how do we do that, right? What do we do? So the good news is we actually have a way to help. So something called coaching, student coaching, has been found to demonstrate improvement, using coaching to improve college students like GPAs, retention rate, so on and so forth. So that's the good news part. But let's find out about the bad news part. So coaching is actually resource intensive and also costly. So according to a systematic review published in 2024, they found in order to be effective, to do effective coaching, that requires at least 12 hours spread over 4 weeks, ideally in person and done by professional coaches. So that could be costly, right? Not every program can afford that. So what do we do? So we know this is the way, but do we have the resources to do it? So then at that point I was thinking, so this is good, but how can we get it done? So I thought about AI, because AI is known to improve efficiency, right? It can help us to recognize patterns and also support our decision making. So why not? So I decided to send AI to the human coach, as you can see that on the screen. So this is the method, how I carry out this project. Number one, I have to learn how to build coaching assistant, which is an AI agent. I built that on ChatGPT for education. So that's the platform because it's secured. At the same time, although we have the AI to help us, it doesn't mean that we can just coach all the students, right, in the program, which is too much. So our program actually established referral criteria. What students are up to what criteria, then we refer them to the learning specialist who is our coach for the students in our program. And at the same time, we have to ensure transparency and consent, right? We let the student know we're using AI to support this coaching service, and they have the option to opt in or opt out. Only if they opt in, then we will use AI to support this coaching process for them. Then afterwards, we will upload, the coaching session transcript, to the, AI agent. So that's how we do the project. Now, so let's take a look at the AI agent itself. So I have 2 versions. So at first, I was thinking, oh yeah, let's make it simple. So I only got 3 tasks for the agent to do. So at that time, the agent was responsible for assessing the learner's learning behaviors and also their internal characteristics. Now, when I say learning behaviors, right? So, like, how do we assess? So I use, something called the MALBAS, which is the Master Adaptive Learner Behavioral Assessment Scale. That's a 30-item scale assessing students' observable learning behaviors. So that was developed by myself and also 2 other co-investigators. Then, at the same time, so now, we do the diagnosis, right? We know, okay, if there's any learning behaviors we want the students to change or any internal characteristics, we want them to improve, then what's next? We need to find out, what should we work on first? So I asked the agent to prioritize, the focus areas that the student need to work on first. And the next thing is, now, after we do the diagnosis, after we do the prioritization, now it's time to treat. So think back, right? I'm a physical therapist, so I always have this mindset, diagnose and treat. So same thing I'm applying to this AI project, because I don't want to just shoot in the dark, right? I want to know what's going on, how can we help? So once we have, the diagnosis, we prioritize, and then now the agent will recommend evidence-based strategies, to help the change. So that's not enough, right? Of course, we always try to get it better, improve. So now I have a version 2. So as you can see on the right side, the blue font, those are the new features added, to this agent. So in addition to the 3 O functions, now the agent of version 2 is actually able to determine stage of change. So I don't know if you have heard of something called the trans-theoretical model. So that means, think back, right? Several decades ago, people were thinking, oh, you smoke? Why don't you just quit, right? They're thinking, oh, I can just tell you to quit smoking, and you quit smoking. It's not that easy to get someone to change the behaviors. So they found out, oh, it's about the state of change. So we do know that we want you to change these behaviors, but you also need to understand, are you ready to make a change? So what stage are you in? Are you just thinking about it, or you are preparing to change, or you're taking some actions, so on and so forth. So I added that to this version 2. At the same time, I also want the coach to have more things that the coach is able to do. So the coach will be able to override what the agent suggests, or confirm what the agent found. And at the bottom, you see one more thing. I'm thinking, since we're helping the students to learn, to become a better learner, why not? We also, put in something for the coach to become a better coach. So that's why the new feature here is optimizing the coach function or the coach ability to provide feedback to the students. One more thing I want to add is this version 2 actually tracks data longitudinally. So not just a one-time thing. It can show you the trajectory. It can also show you the forecast. So the agent is pretty amazing, I would say. So I want to show you how the agent looks like. And this is the front page. And once you log in, you see this coaching agent version 2. And then it will ask you to upload the coaching meeting transcript. So I want you to know, first thing is I did not use any real student data for this demonstration. All these are fake data. Okay, I use AI to create a fake student case for me, okay, for 2 sessions so that I can plug into the agent and show you, what it can do. Now, I also cannot show you the whole output from the agent. It's very detailed, very long. Like I said, the mail batch is 30 items. The agent actually analyzed every single item and also provide supporting quotes directly from the meeting transcripts. So it's not just, I feel like this is a 2, or I feel like this is a 3. They have to show the support, the evidence. So this is just, at the end, for task 1, after the agent assess using the mail batch to assess the learning behaviors and also the internal characteristics, it will show you this high-level dashboard. So you can see, the 4 phases on the left-hand side and also those 4 internal characteristics. What are the status, right? And also, some note on the side. So this is task 1. Remember, we have 5 tasks, right? So now we're going to look at the task 2. So first, the agent will decide, okay, which phase? We have the 4 phases, right? We have the planning, learning, assessing, adjusting. Which phase has the biggest deficit? That would be the phase they would suggest, the coach or the student to work on first. So for this fake case, it's actually the planning phase, as you can see from the screen. So that's the planning phase, but now is the time for the coach to say, hey, do I really think planning phase should be worked on first, or I want the coach to have the ability to confirm or to change the decision coming from the agent. After that, now is time to assess the stage of change. Now that I know you want to change behaviors in the planning phase, what is the stage of change? Are they thinking about it, or are they doing anything about it? So for this fixed student case, it's actually contemplation. That means just thinking about it, considering making changes, but not yet really do too much. Then again, I provide coach. I want the coach to have the ability to override. So it's not just whatever the agent said, right? The coach should have a voice there. Then task 3 is prioritizing the learning needs. Now that we have done the assessment or we have the diagnosis, let's prioritize the learning needs. So as you can see at the bottom, those 5 items, those were generated by the AI agent. And you may wonder, how come the number 3 skip a line? Because it's a screenshot, right? So AI is not perfect. It's really not. So that's why AI, for some reason, skip a line. So here, this is the task 4. This is about treatment now, right? Now that we have done the diagnosis, now that we have prioritized, what do we do? How do we help? So for this, so several strategies were suggested for this fixed case. And the first one is, first, let's look at the stage of change. If this person is in the contemplation stage, what should we do? So it makes a lot of sense, so you can see, and it's based on evidence. So the evidence is right here in the middle, as you can see. And at the bottom, you see the recommendation. Like, for example, increasing awareness of consequences, weigh the pros and cons of the behavior change, so on and so forth. Now, you're also going to look at, the very last task, which is task 5, right? So I want to also help the coach to become a better coach. So here, I love this feature, same as the coach. I was talking to our learning specialist, the other day. She said this is really great for her, even though she's an experienced coach. right? So she's still seeing this is really helping me to learn, what I need to pay attention to, how can I, become a better coach. So here, as you can see, like the coach, giving a lot of positive comments and also telling the coach what to change. And I also love at the end, missed coaching opportunities. That's like, wow, I haven't even thought about. And like I said, the version 2 has this longitudinal data tracking. So when I plug in, and upload the second session, so we get to see the updated dashboard. Now it's a 2-session view. So it's not just one session only, right? And then at the same time, you can see the trend. Has it improved, right, in terms of behaviors? For example, in the planning phase, originally the first time it was moderate, and now it's already strong, right? So it shows the improving trend here. And not only, it has a trajectory. Like I said before, I didn't put the, screenshot here. The agent can also forecast how that, trend is going to move, right? Where is it going to go? So some key takeaways. Number one, I want to say that developing an AI agent is actually more approachable than you may think or than it may seem. So I would say before I started this project, I did not know anything about AI agent. Really nothing. So, but if you want to try, if you want to build an agent, I would highly recommend that start from learning the basics of how to write prompts. Start to learning how to communicate with AI, right? My husband, he's an IT guy. I was thinking if I have to build an agent, I may need to rely on him. No, not even one time. I did not ask him anything. I was able to do it by myself with the help of the CTL, of course, right? So I started with the basic prompt writing, and then once I get that, now I moved on and asked AI to help me refine my prompts. That was really such a good learning experience, and it helped me a lot. So second key takeaway is AI agents work best when they're being structured, when they work best in a structured environment. That means, like this project, I have to define the rubric, which is the MALBAS. I also, put it under a clear framework, which is the MAL model. And please, make sure you have specific objectives. That would be my recommendation. Like, don't just let AI run away and do whatever they want, right? We have to have, some specific objective for the AI to do. And at the end, I want to say the human coach should remain central. They are the most important person in the room, I would say, other than the learner, of course, right? Because AI cannot replace human. AI cannot sense the emotional nuance, right? Cannot interpret, the contextual signals in the room, but human can. And human can develop this, human-to-human kind of rapport with the student or with the learner. So this project, I want to say, if I need to sum it up, I would say this is not about automation, and it's about augmentation. How we use AI to assist and enhance the coach ability to coach students with the aim to turn a struggling student into a happy student or a master adaptive learner, right? If you're going to remember one thing from this presentation, I want you to think about or remember these 6 words. AI supports, coaches lead, students grow. And I also want to take this opportunity to say I'm deeply grateful for the support that I got from the Provost office, from my program director, from my coworkers, and also from Center for Teaching and Learning. And these are the references. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wing. What an amazing presentation. I'd like to introduce our second presenter, Benjamin Breyer, Senior Lecturer for First Year of Writing at Barnard College. That applause is very welcome. Ben will be offering insights from his project, a hypermedia website hosting adaptive AI-guided learning exercises and graphic visualizations of writing concepts in first year writing at Barnard. I'll now turn things over to Ben. Take it away.
Thank you, Marty. I'm very happy to be here, excited to talk about my project. And I'm just going to cover why I built this platform. This is an AI-managed hypermedia platform. What I learned during my Provost grant year, how I redesigned it as a result of what I learned, and what appears to be working now. So at Barnard, I was faced with a challenge at about the same time that ChatGPT went into general release, which is that during that era, Barnard was admitting increasingly diverse classes each year, which is a wonderful thing. But I was seeing, even in my small sections of 15 students, a rather great range of preparedness levels and experience levels. And it was hard to onboard everybody, especially in a class that only lasted 14 weeks. And I would have 18 to 19 writing submissions. So there's a lot of pressure on me to turn over those writing submissions in time with feedback to help them on the next assignment, much less give them enough practice to gain some familiarity with the core academic writing skills that we taught. About this time, I was considering writing a textbook. I wasn't satisfied with the dominant textbooks on the market. But when I considered the ones that were existent in digital form and had supplementary materials like Inquisitive, they were static, they weren't dynamic. They weren't going to help me to assist students of different experience levels. That was something I had to do one-on-one. I just wasn't able to do it sufficiently to ensure that students exiting my class really had some basic level of competency in these writing skills. I was talking to a software engineer at Barnard. I was asking him what could be done. I just gave this mangled description of what I wanted to create, more than a textbook, but I couldn't tell him what exactly. He said, what about a hypermedia platform? I didn't even know what that was. And as he was explaining to me what he meant, it occurred to me that AI might serve as a kind of constrained tutor or coach for the students. And I said, could we possibly design something that was purely adaptive? Because the debate in my field really exists between a ban, which is an outright prohibition, or open use. Bans don't work, that's long been known. Open use carries its own risks with it, particularly for assessment. So I chose a third path, which is constrained use of AI. So I wanted something that was adaptive, responsive, that would meet the students where they're at in their present experience level, but was also customized to my writing sections. So what we built is a website, academicwritingtools.com. It hosts a series of assignment-specific exercises, just the core writing skills that we teach in the class. My intention initially, and this would cause problems later, was to make this scalable or shareable with my colleagues, because it wasn't I alone who felt that the experience level in the classroom had grown quite broad and unwieldy. I was hearing the same thing from colleagues, and the program serves about 750 students a year. So from my perspective, this was a substantial problem that I wanted to make an intervention in. So skills-based inputs, claims, paragraphs, paraphrase, the basic skills that they need to use for success on the longer essay assignments that they're going to do. The feedback that we developed was purely rubric aligned. We built a custom chatbot using OpenAI's API application. And we constrained it so that it will generate no text, no ideas. It will not suggest words or phrases to the students. It's purely responsive to what they input. And its feedback only exists in the form of questions and prompts. It's nudging the students to discover what they themselves want to say. This is what would greet them once they've initiated the activity. So this is the claims evidence analysis exercise. This is a really foundational skill for them, a skill that students often struggle with, supporting their claims with textual evidence and connecting it with some kind of visible reasoning or analysis. So we have a progress bar. It's designed in 3 stages, which I'll talk about during the revision portion of my presentation. Gives them directions, purpose, and then once they've actually engaged with this, they read a passage from one of our course readings. This is one of the reasons why I didn't choose one of OpenAI's enterprise-oriented models. I chose a custom-built application because I wanted it centered on my own course materials. So this is a passage from one of the novels the students read. They address a prompt by making a claim about the passage. And year 1 was a rather painful experience. I went into this thinking that surely the custom chatbot trained on my course materials, trained on my rubrics, the reinforcement training that we had gone through with various levels of test users, with various levels of experience, would result in the students who were in my experimental section submitting work that was better than the work done by the control group who had no access to the AI. That wasn't the case with one exception. It was rather disappointing. So when I looked at the output logs that I pulled from the website, time spent on task, read the transcripts of their interactions with the chatbot, I came to a couple of conclusions. And one of them was that the chatbot feedback, which we had already tried to constrain, was overwhelming the students. It was simply too dense. The students were suffering from what I termed cognitive overload. And even in the conversations where the student would spend an extended period of time in conversation, they could stay on as long as they want. We had conversations that extended more than 100 turns in the conversations. These students were really working with the chatbot. Some were much shorter. Even in the conversations that were more extended, what seemed to develop over the course of the conversation is what I'm calling algorithmic validation. They were writing to satisfy the chatbot, and rather than showing independent judgment, is the chatbot's feedback in alignment with what I want to achieve or what I want to say as a writer, which also led me to question whether or not they really understood the authority that the chatbot held in this interaction that they were having with it. Kind of overall, what emerged was that they weren't really prepared to use the platform. They couldn't just be presented it cold and told to interact with this, but they were unsure what to make of it. So I also found, and that's what I had alluded to earlier, my intention had been to create exercises that I could share with colleagues because the exercises taught the same core writing skills. But one of my findings from the assessment of year one was that transfer, evidence of transfer, was quite slight. So when students were not using passages in the exercises that they were then later going to use in their essays, there was less learning transfer from exercise to essay. But when there was continuity, there was stronger evidence of transfer, which made sharing the exercises with my colleagues who teach different texts problematic, and will have to be another aspect of the website that's redesigned and allows for the uploading and tuning of the prompts. So I also learned that this is part of the reciprocal aspect of this project that I like to point to. In working with the AI like Wing, I had no experience prior to this. When I conceived of using AI in this project, I never actually used AI. It simply popped into my head after reading 2 articles in the New York Post, and I asked the engineer, is this theoretically possible? And he said yes, and I had to run home and sign up for a ChatGPT account and start getting with it. So it's been a quite interesting project for me as someone who was very tech adverse. Over the last 2 years, my classes have become very tech heavy now, and I'll say something about that. But it's had an influence on my non-AI assignment design process, because in going through the assessment last summer and realizing things like cognitive overload or looking at things like algorithmic validation surface in some of these conversations, I began to realize that even in classes where I wasn't using AI, where I wasn't incorporating the platform, I was perhaps assuming too much in the transition from classroom group practice to individual practice. I needed to slow down and make my exercises more scaffolded. So one of the things that I did for this fall, which did result ultimately in the group using AI outperforming the control group, is I slowed down the pace of the exercises. Rather than asking them to make several rhetorical moves at once, I tiered the prompts, and they would progress through 3, make a claim, advance evidence, connect the 2 with analysis. Not only did that ensure that the feedback was less comprehensive and less likely to overwhelm, it focused the feedback from the AI, and consequently, the products that we were getting as a result of these conversations were more analytically insightful. The students tended to use more academic language to convey the process of analysis. And I think it was more successful. And I also made sure that the exercises aligned very closely with the ultimate essay assignments. This is what I was saying, that the large submissions from year one resulted in overload, cognitive overload. Many micro-turns could result in fragmentation of the composing process. Some students just got lost in the weeds. They were really considering very small-scale aspects of what they were trying to articulate, and then consequently loss of macro-level coherence. And then calibration of scope and pacing, which is what I'm saying about use of tiered prompts, for example, to slow it down, to give the students more of a chance to compose discrete sections, to submit them, to get feedback, then to advance to the next part of the assignment. Had the dual benefit of better feedback from the AI, as well as a more sort of measured composing process. I think the students in year one who didn't use the AI in the control group, their composing process just wasn't disrupted. The conversation aspect of the AI, and this is algorithmic AI, it's not a chatbot, an agent. Okay, so what I would offer for suggestions, tiered prompts are a good way of managing the AI's tendency to be very chatty and loquacious. Controlling the submission scope of the inputs that the students are placing, using one dimension at a time for the focus, trying to reduce turn frequency in the conversation. We also even capped the prompt, the chatbot to writing only 1 to 3 sentences in response. It's just not going to go off the rails. And trying to slow down the conversation. and directing alignment with course text, as I've said. Another improvement that I made for fall 2025 was after I realized that the students weren't really prepared yet to use the platform, was to incorporate in my class an AI literacy module. I teach a standalone AI literacy class over 14 weeks. I couldn't do that in first year writing. I had really just a limited chance for an intervention before they got on the platform. So I created an AI literacy module that does incorporate an AI agent. They're required to use this before getting on the platform. They interact with the agent, and they're able to explore how generative AI works, to explore also authorship norms in the context of Barnard's academic integrity policy. They take a quiz, they write a short essay at the end, but it better positions them to understand the authority of the AI in the conversation that they're having, how they're to make sense of its feedback, when to understand that certain use requests might be inappropriate under the integrity policy. And these are some of the things that I saw in the exercises from fall 2025. Thesis precision, stronger evidence linkage, reduced patch whiting, and more stable macro argument structure, really addressing some of the weaknesses from the previous year. I also want to say that a couple of things. One is because we used an open AI API application, we're exempt from their data collection policy. So we were able to sort of work around data sharing. I didn't opt into that, obviously. And so that was beneficial. And the other thing I'll say is that I made AI use optional in my experimental section to respect student agency because the students are far from monolithic in their attitudes towards AI use. So students who didn't wish to use the AI could just opt out entirely. They could also switch between the platform on a situational basis. So for some skills, they might have found it useful. For others, they felt comfortable working on their own. Both experimental group and the control group also received the same attention from me. I was at a CTL event a year ago, and someone excitedly said, "You've automated your first year writing sections." It's far from it. It's provided me more reach than I had before. I can provide them with additional guidance and feedback because they're now getting synchronous feedback on their work, real-time feedback, which before I would have to write comments, return it to them, those slow turns, and then we would be on to the next assignment. So again, there were limited chances for intervention. But because of the platform, they get real-time feedback. They can stay on the exercises as long as they feel comfortable to the point that they're satisfied. It allows me to give them more guidance. It's trained on my materials. It sounds like me. At times it's kind of eerie. Doesn't respond to my name though, mercifully. And it's been a good experience, but it's far from automating my classroom. It's actually something else that I oversee now is the platform. It's just, I think it provides them more support, more guidance beyond what I could give them logistically, beyond the office hours, beyond extended time, beyond email, beyond what the writing center can provide with them. Right? It will give them that additional. It's also a question of equity. It's also very non-judgmental. For those of you who perhaps have taught writing or worked with students carefully on their writing, you know that this is a very sensitive subject. And I always tell people that being a writing teacher is as much as being a psychologist as it is a writing teacher. And being able to speak to people of different dispositions. They find this reassuring. They find it friendly and comforting. Yeah, and these are just some of the things that I think I've been speaking to. But one thing I like to stress, at least for me, is that AI integration was a design question, not a technology question. I think in my field, the conversation has centered very much on it as AI as technology rather than as a design issue. And I would even argue, and this has probably sort of inhibited the advancement of the conversation. But alignment, cognitive load, and literacy determine whether AI strengthens. I think that was one of the takeaways for me. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Ben. And for our third project, our third presentation, we're lucky enough to have two fantastic presenters, Lee Abraham and Beri Yang. Lee, there we go. Lee is the interim director for undergraduate studies and a senior lecturer in the Department of Latin American and Iberian cultures at Columbia. He will discuss his project integrating critical artificial intelligence literacy into the intermediate Spanish classroom through a faculty-student partnership. As the name of the project implies, Lee collaborated closely on this project with an undergraduate student pedagogical partner who we're so thrilled can join us, Beri Yang, an economics major at Columbia College. And Lee and Beri, we're eager to learn from you. Take it away.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you all for being here this afternoon. I know there's a lot going on, and Beri and I and the panel appreciate you taking time out to join us this afternoon. I come bearing prepared remarks. I know. But I do so because I want to make every minute count, and because I generally cannot wait, and we cannot wait, to your Q&A and to our panel's interaction around generative AI in teaching and learning. Before I say anything about generative artificial intelligence, and in keeping with the spirit of the project that Marty so graciously introduced, I want to take a moment to express my deep and enduring gratitude to the Provost Office of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation, and especially to the extraordinary members of the Center for Teaching and Learning, Susanna Clough, Rebecca Petiti, Elisa Famolari, Martin Samuels, and beyond the CTL, to Beri Yang, who is here with me today, and to Bruno Bostiels, Dean of Humanities in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, to my department, and I see my esteemed colleagues from across arts and sciences have joined us today. Thank you for coming. All of this that we're going to talk about, and Beri and I will engage in a dialogue through these prepared remarks to make it worth your time, happened because of all the aforementioned people, and only because of the aforementioned people. And having just had the privilege of hearing from Dr. Wu and Dr. Breyer, I am deeply honored to be part of this conversation along such inspiring colleagues. Our focus here in the next few minutes, and I promise there will be questions that I hope I will ask, that you will ask of yourselves and that we will ask of each other, will be on reading and more broadly viewing as we expand into visual media and writing and the learning and teaching of languages, literatures, and cultures in our era of Gen AI. But at the heart of what I hope to share from the classroom, and that we hope to share with you today, and that you take away, is the importance of human connections, human experiences, and relationships around generative AI, built together in genuine partnership between faculty, staff, and students. That is to say that the humanities, human intelligence, the human connections and experiences, and the human communication that the humanities cultivate remain as essential and exciting as ever before. But maybe like many of you, in the years since OpenAI's ChatGPT became available in November 2022, you found yourself asking a very obvious question. Now what? What to do, how to do it, and with whom to do it. Which led me to ask, who better to help us navigate this together than in partnership with our undergraduate students, and I see some of you in the room as well, who are studying, working, and living through this, just like all of us here in the room are. Not only is that a very good place to start, it may help us in part to answer the overarching question of today's forum, which I'm sure you've heard many times, but I'll repeat it again. How does a university learn and adapt as AI becomes woven into teaching, learning, and intellectual life? So that question led me to a framework, and this is a framework that is gaining real momentum in higher education. It's known as Students as Partners, Student-Faculty Pedagogical Partnerships, Students Consulting on Teaching, and that is built on 4 core principles that will cut across all of the disciplines that you represent here in the room. They are respect, reciprocity, shared responsibility, and trust. At the heart, this framework, with and without generative AI, asks us to think differently about teaching and learning. Who are our students, and what could their roles be in teaching and learning? Are they simply taking our exams, completing our assignments, and filling out the course evaluations at the end of the semester? Or could they be trusted collaborators with something genuinely essential to contribute to how we teach and learn together? If the latter, then that opens up some genuinely exciting possibilities for teaching and learning at Columbia and Barnard. For example, could our students consult on how a course is designed? Could they help co-create the very activities through which they learn? And you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Could they be the ones to tell us, honestly, what is landing in the classroom and what isn't, and how we could improve the student experience, which is really the core of the partnership that Beri and I are going to talk about. Columbia CTL has been a vital home and support for this work through their Students as Pedagogical Partners initiative. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Beri Yang, seated right beside me, a junior in Columbia College majoring in economics, who completed Intermediate Spanish 1 with me and has been the most thoughtful collaborator and partner throughout this pedagogical journey. Together and with the CTL team, we have been working on redesigning activities for a chapter in our textbook focused on climate change, sustainability, and responsible consumption, informed by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, weaving in what we are calling a critical generative AI literacy. Now, this redesign is very much underway. What does this mean practically? We are using Columbia's Google Gemini platform, available to all students, faculty, and staff, in order to compare AI-generated content with authentic text, and then to analyze how AI can become itself a vehicle for misinformation, disinformation. Our objective is to make AI's limitations and challenges transparent and visible, and to do that together in the classroom in partnership. So Beri, when we first started working together, what was your initial reaction to this kind of partnering that I've talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my first reaction was that I was really glad that they chose you for this, project. Obviously, those that know Professor Abraham, I think know that he has a very unique style of teaching that's very student-centered and focused on, student well-being, student first. And I thought that he was sort of the perfect perspective to bring into something like this. I was also just very impressed. I thought it was very admirable for the Spanish department to be so proactive and sort of get a jump on this, I guess. I thought this was a very interesting study to be having, right? I think, obviously, we've had generative AI for a little bit now. I know that sort of as it first came up and it started, making waves in education, especially, my freshman year, sophomore year, the focus was just banning it, right? It was pretty much not allowed. I mean, teachers just pretend like you couldn't use it. They just say you can't. And obviously, students were still using it. So I think as, the world has evolved around AI, AI is clearly here to stay. And as it's sort of changing the landscape of education and just the landscape of the world as a whole, I guess, it's here. And it's very important that rather than see it as this sort of tool for destruction, like projects like, Dr. Breyer and Fu have shown, you can use it as sort of a tool to enhance education, right? So I was really, really excited to sort of see something like this spearheaded by the program. Regarding, what my role would be on the actual project, obviously I was very blessed. I was very thankful, but I was very uncertain of what I could contribute. I'm just undergraduate student that took Spanish with Professor Abraham. And I wasn't really too sure what I could add to the conversation, but I think the project and working with CTL and Professor Abraham throughout this semester has really sort of opened my eyes a lot and made me actually more active in my own education and to what perspective I can bring for something like this.
Yeah, and to your point, we're going to share a little bit about the kind of uncertainty that many of the undergraduates in the room may feel. What could I really say about generative AI? I'm a student, I'm learning the content, I'm trying to understand the discipline, the disciplinary big questions. And so part of what I think the partnership program through the CTL does an excellent job at is getting us to think about that our students do have a role. They are obviously not the content experts, but they do have experiences that may be in other courses they've taken or on internship, as many of our students do internships. And we're going to hear about the world of AI in the workplace later this afternoon as well. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we found in the time remaining. But I want to share a little bit about a kind of a teachable moment because I want to make sure that we have time. One of the goals originally of the grant, as I mentioned, was in reading and writing. And so what we were thinking about as a team is, okay, we want to teach reading and writing, and Dr. Breyer has done admirable work in looking at composition instruction. And so in that regard, we were thinking, what is the best way to talk about the questions of generative AI literacy that Dr. Breyer mentioned at the end of the talk? Can we see how AI generates an argumentative text in Spanish? Can we see how it generates a letter to the editor in an opinion piece? And in the end, in conversation with the team and above all with Beri, we decided to meet students where they are, right? Which is, quite frankly, an important observation and a reminder that when we're thinking about AI, thinking about it through the lens of the students and what they're experiencing and living through is certainly an important entryway. And so that was a pivotal moment in our conversation where instead of looking at argumentative texts, we were going to look at visual media or social media posts on Instagram and begin to understand that AI, if you've used Nano Banana and Gemini, or you've used any kind of visual generation tool, is extremely good at generating that. And so that becomes an opportunity for us to say, here is what a visual medium that our students are looking at on their phones looks like in the real world. Here is what the AI looks like. And in terms of the point about misinformation and disinformation, it opens up opportunities to talk about information literacy and also media literacy and also AI literacy. And so I have 2 minutes remaining, but I want Beri to share a little bit about that conversation that we had about, and I should mention before we delve in and Beri comments on that, we are using the kind of Instagram social media posts as a tool to then, as a gateway or entry point to looking at academic text. So it's not like we decided, okay, we're going to abandon the argumentative reading and writing that students need to do. It just became a hook and also an important lens to look at many of the generative AI media literacy questions that our panelists have talked about previously, and I'm sure you may have heard in the morning. So could you share a little bit about your thinking behind going that route with a more visual piece?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, obviously, I think this has been a very transformative experience for me, obviously being able to partner with Professor Abraham, the CTL, like sort of seeing another perspective, that of like, you know, my instructors, the back end, the administrative, that, you know, I sort of never think about. And, you know, hopefully I like to think it might go both ways, then perhaps they can see a little bit of my perspective. I thought that, you know, in the original lens that we were looking at, sort of the course, we were just thinking of generating more maybe AI text, like, you know, like sort of these articles to analyze. And, you know, in my experience taking the classes, I thought that, I mean, that's sort of something we already do, right? And why would we generate it with AI if we're sort of already doing that? I thought AI can do all these crazy things, you know, like these days, I mean, the exponential growth has been insane, right? But like they can generate videos, images, like you can't even tell from reality or AI anymore. So I thought, why not sort of leverage that into something a little bit more interesting, more applicable that students might want to engage in. And I just thought that was, I mean, it's like a very small thing, right? But I thought it was very sort of indicative of our program and what we're trying to do here as a whole, right? It just sort of, AI obviously is changing how we teach, and there's like really no playbook, right? That's kind of the scary part, and the fun part is there's sort of no precedent for this. And, you know, obviously that's scary because you don't really have anything to fall back on. But it's also interesting as you can really take it as a chance to do something new and sort of redesign education in the context of generative AI and sort of reimagine it maybe just for better overall, right? It's like you can take some things that were working with the old and, you know, sort of take this creative approach that AI is now forcing you to kind of look at. And I think overall, you know, you can really redesign something special that's just better overall if, you know, it's like than ever before.
We have some takeaways, and I know I'm a minute over time, but we're going to share some takeaways. Thank you for that. And some of those actually dovetail quite nicely. One lesson is quite immediate from the panel. If you've not already done so, talk with your students. listen with intent. They have fears. They've used AI in the classroom on their internship, and it's not that they are always gung-ho with AI. Gen AI tools change quickly. So one of the things that we're working on is to look at frameworks. You may have heard that the American Association of Colleges and Universities and Elon University has a student guide to AI. EDUCAUSE has a guide to AI literacy. Barnard colleagues and my colleagues over at Barnard have developed an AI literacy framework. And the reason that I mention frameworks, those will evolve if they're good as the tools change, but it gives you a nice anchor to be able to talk with your students if you have a framework. And the final point I would make, because I recognize that many of you are from different disciplines, is that the American Bar Association, the American Historical Association, the National Society of Professional Engineers, the American Medical Association, the Modern Language Association, all are developing or have developed disciplinary guidance and frameworks. Now, for those of you in upper-level seminar classes, that provides an amazing opportunity to bring the disciplinary conversations around AI back into your classroom, because they are going to be going out, as Beri mentioned, into a world of AI. Let's begin that conversation now by having them talk about that. Let me just close. I know I'm cutting into Q&A, but I want to leave you with two questions. Whatever your discipline, whether you're in the humanities, the sciences, engineering, medicine, education, I hope that in the story today that Beri and I told, it sparks a next step, a new question, or simply a good talk, or a series of conversations with your students. Now the two questions.
So much. Okay, as you can see, there's a QR code. Please feel free to ask questions and vote up questions. And in the meantime, as people are posing the questions, I just have one for our amazing team of faculty members here, which is, there's one common thing that we always hear is how AI erodes trust between students and teachers. That's partly because of the academic integrity issues or things like that, or exactly as what Beri was speaking to, how scary this new technology is and how to have confidence in it. So I was just wondering how, your projects all involve cultivating trust in you and your teaching strategies and the tools that you're using. How did you have conversations with students? How did you build that trust with your students? I stumped the team. Please go ahead, Lee.
We just have to talk about it with them. It sounds very simple, but I'll give you an example from language, right? When students are using ChatGPT or whatever the AI tool is to do their writing, it can, number one, speak to a concern about the assessment framework that we're using and transparency around rubrics and transparency on a number of levels. So let me just put that concern aside. But I also think that we need to explain and model why using AI as a shortcut or a cognitive shortcut affects other skills, right? So we often don't think of writing and reading in a language as affecting speaking or listening, but actually if AI is doing the writing for you and we believe that writing is thinking, then you're not going to be able to think as you would making mistakes when you do your own writing, right? And so the error correction, the process that's in place when you're doing skills-based activities is fundamentally something that when AI is used as a shortcut has knockoff effects down the road. And so one of the ways that I do that is we talk about it, right? This is why translation hasn't been good. This is why it hasn't been bad, right? Here's why. And I think if we don't ban, as Dr. Breyer talked about and Wu talked about, but not banning is not enough, right? Having the conversation, asking them for their experiences, right? How have they used AI on their internships? How have they used AI in other courses? And making them feel comfortable to have the conversation, right? And don't just assume that they're using it for bad intent, right? I think that's what I would do. So let me shut up and turn over to my colleagues.
Saying that transparency is essential and making clear to them that the emphasis is on learning, not on surveillance and suspicion. right, which I think tends to dominate the conversation on campus. Their perception is one of mistrust and suspicion, but if you shift that to learning and inquiry and understanding, it does really enable this conversation. It breaks that wall down, and they will readily share with you their experiences, which are quite extraordinary. The pressure that they feel under to write without being falsely identified as someone who might have plagiarized by an AI detection system, and the lengths that they will go to ensure that they're not going to be subject to false accusation, and the psychological harm that false accusation can bring with it. Certainly had many ESL students speak to this, or international students speak to this. It is a critical conversation that we absolutely have to have, and I would argue that we have a responsibility to have with them.
Quick comment. I echo what the two peer panelists said. At the same time, I want to refer back to the project that I'm working on. None of the students that we approached had opt out of this AI assisting coach experience. I think the purpose of using AI is critical here. So in order to build trust, they need to know what are you using AI for, how are you going to use it. So I agree, right? Transparency, that's important. Consent, that's important. At the same time, once they know, oh, AI is using as a supportive tool, right? Not to evaluate me. So that's very different. I think that's something I want to add. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Let me ask one popular question from the audience, which is, I don't know where to start. If I want to start innovating with AI in the classroom, how would I do so? So maybe I can ask you, how did you pick where to start in these projects? Do you want to start, Wayne?
I didn't really use AI in the classroom. I use it outside the classroom, but still for learning purposes. So I think it doesn't matter where it is, right? But in terms of what matters most is, how can I use AI to help the learning? Because that's what I want to do. And I have to find what is the missing link there, or what is the thing that I want to improve, right? Once I am able to diagnose, like I said before, then I can treat. So that would be the advice that I have. Mm-hmm.
Amazing, thank you.
As I said at the beginning of my talk, I had a pedagogical problem to solve, and this was the tool to solving it. So it was a natural fit for me. I wouldn't recommend it unless you had a need. Right. I mean, it may be part of your disciplinary field and you should be conversing with it for that reason, but don't allow technology for its own sake to lead to its introduction in the classroom. It needs to have a purpose and a fit.
Would you want to? I would echo, not much to add, but I would add that however you want to get started in AI, let the students be the center of the work, not the disciplinary development, but make sure that they have agency, that they have voice, that you've established trust, that there is reciprocity, shared responsibility, and an opportunity for them to show that they have a fundamental role in their undergraduate education at Columbia and Barnard, and that they are ready, willing, and able to do so.
Fantastic. Can I just like to close by once again thanking our amazing panelists and who are willing not only to share their projects and their successes, but all their challenges and the processes that they went through. I also want to thank the Office of the Provost for generously supporting and funding these projects and for making conversations like this possible. There's also been a lot of questions about how do I get a pedagogical partnership. Lee and Beri, you are our greatest cheerleaders. If you want, please reach out to us. We would love to help you develop a pedagogical partnership program. And we'd also love to help you think about how you can apply for this year's round of Teaching and Learning Innovation grants. More information can be found on the Office of Teaching and Learning Innovation website. We also have some handouts available for you if anyone's interested. And so thank you again. We'd love to hear more about how we can support you. And we're going to wrap this up. Thank you.